Sri Gita Satsang. Today we will be starting with chapter 3. So before we start the learning of chapter 3, I request Ghanshyamji, can we start with Sahana Vavatu? Ghanshyamji?
Ji Devi, Jai Gurudev.
Yes, we will start with Sahana Vavatu.
Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahatyam Karvavahe Tejashvinam Mastu Maharishi. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you. So now we will have the recitation of chapter 3, verses 1 to 4, which are the verses that we are going to study today. So Ghanshyamji, can you recite the first 4 verses of chapter 3?
Om Sri Paramatmane Namaha. Ath Tritiyodhyaya. Arjuna Vacha. Jyayasi Chet Karmanaste Mata Buddhir Janardana Tatyam Karmani Ghore Ma Niyojayasi Keshava.
Okay. Hemaji, can we have the recitation of the verses as we are going ahead with the commentary?
Yes.
Okay. So may I now request Himabindu to kindly read the vision of chapter 3.
Yes, Bhati, thank you. Jai Gurudev. A vision of the teaching in chapter 3, verses 1 to 4. Equanimity, the basis of all success and salvation in life, is gained and made permanent in 2 ways, by the path of knowledge and the path of action. Verses 5 to 60. Both paths culture the mind and reorientate the functioning of the senses. By the practice of gaining transcendental consciousness and then engaging in action, the infusion of being into the nature of the mind enables it to maintain equanimity and sets the senses spontaneously to perform actions which are natural and useful to evolution. Verses 17 to 20. When, through practice, transcendental consciousness becomes permanent, the purpose of all action is accomplished. In this state of fulfillment, action that is right must be performed because it brings perfection in life and good to the world. Verse 21. One should be careful of one's actions because others follow one's example. Verses 22 to 26. The Lord of creation, himself remaining uninvolved, is engaged in constant activity. So, a man living in the light of God should engage in action, remaining himself uninvolved, inspiring others to perform their natural duty. Verses 27 to 29. All actions are performed by the forces of nature, but through ignorance, man takes their authorship upon himself and becomes bound by them. The enlightened man knows the truth and enjoys freedom even while engaged in activity. Verses 30 to 35. The enlightened man should help to raise the consciousness of the ignorant. The technique for raising consciousness is to surrender all action to God. Control does not accomplish anything because everything is worked out according to nature. The criterion of right action is not like and dislike, but natural duty. Verses 36 to 43. The excitement born of desire and anger is opposed to the practice of gaining equanimity. The seat of desire and anger is in the senses, mind, and intellect. By raising awareness above these and becoming established in transcendental consciousness, one becomes capable of spontaneously performing right action in the state of freedom. When transcendental consciousness is developed to coexist with the waking state of consciousness, then the inner state of no problems coexists with the outer world of problems. Man lives in freedom while acting in the field of bondage. This is the glory of the path of action.
Thank you, Bindu.
Jai Gurudev.
Hemaji, may I continue as Anita ji is here? Jai Gurudev, Anita ji.
Yes, Madhvi,
Yes,
I've
Anita ji.
I've
Can you
just
please?
joined.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So,
Anita ji.
Shall I
yes,
continue?
Will you be giving the overview of the second chapter, third chapter, or you want someone else to read, Anita ji?
no, I had asked Hima to read.
She
If she's
finished
not
the
there,
vision. The
yeah,
vision is done.
yeah, the vision is done. Okay, I just joined. I'll do the introduction.
Yes.
I've just joined. I'll do the introduction, Madhvi. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and because I thought that was very important, and the introduction of the third chapter. Uh, The second chapter had presented Brahma Vidya, the wisdom of the full life, the wisdom of the absolute and the relative, in both its aspects, theoretical and practical. The theoretical aspect is called the wisdom of Sankhya. It brings understanding of the absolute and the relative fields of life as separate, one from another. The practical aspect is called yoga, and it brings direct experience of these two fields of life in separation. The nature of this experience gained through the practice of yoga and its application to life in the world are unfolded in this third chapter. The aim is to make permanent the state of absolute bliss consciousness so that it will not be lost even when the mind is engaged in the activity of the relative world. This field can give full experience of life for the life in relative and absolute simultaneously. This third chapter presents a practical application of the second. It describes in detail the role of the established intellect in the practical life, so as to provide those occupied in the marketplace of the world with a direct way of evolution and eternal liberation. Its teaching is applicable to everyone, whatever his vocation. This chapter develops the seed thought contained in the first three words of the verse 48 of the second chapter. Yogastha kuru karmani, established in yoga, perform actions. The doctrine of Karma Yoga, the yoga of action, forms the chapter's main theme. Karma is in the field of diversity and yoga is unity. Therefore, in order to understand Karma Yoga, one must be as familiar with the unity of life as with the field of diversity. Only by being at home in both fields can one understand the link between them. The teaching of the third chapter is designed to bring this about. But it is important for the student of Karma Yoga to remember that an intellectual understanding of the teaching of this chapter without personal experience of the real nature of unity can never bring the fruits of Karma Yoga. The technique of directly contacting the transcendental divine consciousness, as brought out in the verse 45 of the second chapter, has to be practiced. Only on the basis of that personal experience is it possible to attain fulfillment in life through Karma Yoga. The practice of transcendental meditation is essential if the wisdom of this chapter is to be put in practical use. Chekute.
Thank you, Anita ji. May I request Ghanshyam ji, can you please once again recite the first verse of chapter 3?
ॐ श्री परमात्मने नमः। अथ तृतीयोऽध्यायः। अर्जुनोवाच ध्यायसि चेत् कर्मणस्ते मता बुद्धिर्जनार्दन तत्किं कर्मणि घोरे मां नियोजयसि केशव।
Jai Gurudev. Arjuna said, if thou considerest knowledge superior to action, O Janardana, why dost thou spur me to this terrible deed, O Keshava? Arjuna's question, with which this chapter opens, does not indicate that he was confused and had missed the import of Bhagwan Sri Krishna's discourse in the second chapter, as commentaries have often suggested. Such interpretations show the commentators' own inability to follow the sequence of Bhagwan's words. They have clearly failed to understand the aptness of Arjuna's questions in helping to develop the Bhagwan's theme. His questions represent the glorious links between the teachings which precede and follow them in the ascending order of Bhagwan Sri Krishna's discourse. A close examination of the context will reveal that Arjuna's questions present themselves in a natural way. This is due not only to the skill of the Bhagwan's teaching and Arjuna's promptness in following it, but also to the nature of the subject under consideration. Teaching about life deals with many points, even points opposed to each other, for it deals with unlimited fields of the relative and absolute phases of existence. These lie so far apart that in their essential nature, there exists no link between them. The mind, however, can serve as such a link because it is able to remain in activity and in the state of absolute being at the same time. Moreover, it uses activity as a means to end activity and thus to make possible the state of transcendental consciousness. Karma thus becomes a means to yoga. Such are the apparently self-contradictory phases of the teaching about life to which Arjuna's questions draw attention. It is obvious, therefore, that his questions are pertinent and arise out of his right understanding of the discourse. The relevance of the questions asked by the pupil reveals the success of the teaching. The teacher even creates an opportunity for the pupil to ask each question, thus sustaining his interest and making sure that he is properly following the discourse. And when the teaching advances in this manner, by way of question and answer, it unfolds the whole of wisdom for the pupil. Jai Gurudev, Anita ji, I think you would be continuing from here.
May I ask Hemaji, will she like to give the comments first, or should we complete the verse?
We have 2 more pages of reading, is it?
Yes,
Yeah,
Himanshu.
yeah. But
Yeah.
it's a big verse. Right.
Yeah. So I will make a small point here,
Right.
because it is a long commentary.
Yes, yes.
So in this, Maharishi made one very important point in this commentary. He said the purpose of Karma Yoga is to bring out the knowledge where one is successful in action by means of staying in the relative and at the same time established in absolute. So that underlying basis of action is there. And when one is established in silence and still performing action, one is able to be very successful in action. So this is the main point that we are going to consider in this 3rd chapter, Karma Yoga. And some commentators say that Arjuna is all confused, but Maharishi says not so. He is alert and he is asking good questions. Because in the last chapter, in chapter 2, Sri Krishna Bhagavan put a lot of emphasis on knowledge. And so now Arjuna is asking about the relationship between knowledge and dharma. See, this was not made clear yet. So he wants to know, because dharma, in his opinion, is very important. So he wants to know what is the connection between knowledge and dharma. And unless he knows all about this knowledge and dharma, teaching about action is not complete, because dharma means you're supposed to do your allotted duty. So to do the duty, you have to have the knowledge of dharma and action also. So this point is elaborated in the rest of the commentary and also in the next verse. So I'll be saying more about this, actually more in the next verse. So now we will continue reading. Go ahead, please.
If thou considerest knowledge in order to probe deep into the nature of Arjuna's understanding about knowledge, it is necessary to analyze the teaching of the 2nd chapter. Life has 2 aspects, relative and absolute. The relative aspect is perishable and the absolute is imperishable. In order to give meaning to life, it is first necessary to bring the perishable aspect into living harmony with the imperishable. This is achieved through the action according to one's dharma, which maintains existence in a way that furthers one's own evolution and that of others. In order to set the whole stream of life flowing naturally in the ascending current of dharma, it is necessary to cultivate the resolute intellect. This will ensure that both aspects of man's life, perishable and imperishable, the body and the self, will naturally maintain their dharma and be in perfect harmony. The self remaining in a state of eternal freedom in absolute being, and the mind entertaining activity which will naturally be in tune with the process of evolution. In order to cultivate the resolute intellect, one has to be without the 3 gunas, completely out of the field of activity, established in the transcendental state of being. When, through constant practice and gaining the state without the 3 gunas, the mind gains fixity in being, what becomes aware of the self or being as separate from activity. In this state, one acts in the world while established in the eternal contentment and freedom of the divine consciousness. Therefore, although knowledge begins with the intellectual understanding of the two aspects of life, perishable and imperishable, it becomes a living reality only when, through the practice of transcendental meditation, one becomes directly aware of the self as separate from activity. This awareness is the state of knowledge, the state of established intellect. Arjuna has rightly understood all that Sri Krishna Bhagavan has spoken about knowledge, but he demands confirmation that his understanding is correct. The word if brings out this meaning, knowledge superior to action. Arjuna asks his question not because he has failed to grasp the principle of action in the state of knowledge, but because he has thoroughly understood that when a man acts without longing, having relinquished all desires, free from the sense of I and mine, he attains to peace. He has understood that by fighting he will not incur sin, but for that great heart of Arjuna's merely to escape from sin is not that great heart, is not sufficient reason for plunging into action. He judges the action of the fighting at its face value and finds that to kill his dear ones would be a terrible deed. He raises the question whether, on the strength of knowledge, he could, after all, avoid the terrible deed of battle. Having reached this high state of established intellect, should not a man have freedom to act or not to act? This is Arjuna's question from his high state of consciousness. Arjuna here silently uses Sri Krishna Bhagavan's teaching about the freedom which knowledge gives in favor of the freedom to choose what action he wishes to perform. He probes deep into Sri Krishna Bhagavan's teaching and finds that this point has not yet been answered. This question further indicates that Arjuna has understood not only the relationship between action and knowledge, but also that between action and dharma. He has understood that Shri Krishna Bhagavan's teaching about dharma. He has understood that one's own dharma is the best criterion for judging the appropriateness of action, and that for a Kshatriya, a battle such as this is in accord with dharma. But the stress that Sri Krishna Bhagavan has put on knowledge gives Arjuna an opportunity to question him about the relationship between knowledge and dharma, which has not yet been made clear and without which the teaching about action remains incomplete. Arjuna wants to know whether knowledge can override dharma to the extent of permitting one to forego a particular deed, whether knowledge gives a man sufficient freedom to enable him to make his own choice about action. Arjuna implies that if it does, he would like to choose to forego this terrible deed. The question that Arjuna raises is of deep significance and has great value in furthering the theme of Sri Krishna Bhagavan's discourse. It is this question of Arjuna's that brings forth a complete doctrine of action from the lips of Sri Krishna Bhagavan. Commentators in general have missed the great depth of understanding from which Arjuna was speaking and asking questions because they have misunderstood his position right from the first chapter. Arjuna, from his high level of consciousness, is able to distinguish the finest points of Sri Krishna Bhagavan's discourse and to weigh them up in the terms of practical life. His alert mind locates many contradictory statements in the teaching so far, and he makes mention of these in the verse which follows. This explains How apt is Arjuna's question, how well it serves to unfold the wisdom of action in the light of knowledge, which forms the main subject of this chapter. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. So, very clear here in commentary why Arjuna is asking this question. Because it is very clearly said that knowledge is superior to action in chapter 2. So now he wants to know if he has that kind of knowledge, then can he choose what he wants to do? Because we are always saying you have a choice. So when you have the knowledge, he's asking if he can make a choice to fight or not to fight. But he wants to make sure, confirm from Sri Krishna Bhagavan that what he's thinking is right. So he wants to know whether he has a choice or not. If he has a choice, he's still thinking in terms of not fighting, because he's using the word terrible deed, which is true. To kill your relatives is a terrible deed. So he's still looking for answers to avoid this terrible deed of killing his relatives. So Arjuna also understood that the resolute intellect is necessary to be successful in action. So the resolute intellect means the mind is anchored to being, to the silence of Atma. And in that situation, you are having the benefit of both fields, both aspects of life, because the mind, it is in the relative, and at the same time, it is in the absolute, because as a result of resolute intellect, the mind is anchored to Atma. So you have that stability of silence inside of you, and still you are able to perform action. And that's what brings success to action. And also in the previous chapter, had been indicated that one is free from sin when one is acting as one is established in yoga, that is union, that is the state of balanced state and the state of union of the mind with Atma. So now this question, he asks one more question in the next, and then we are going to talk more about it in the next verse also. And I'll say briefly in Hindi. अर्जुन बोले, हे जनार्दन, यदि आपको कर्म की अपेक्षा ज्ञान श्रेष्ठ मान्य है, तो फिर हे केशव, मुझे भयंकर कर्म में क्यों लगाते हैं? तो ये अर्जुन पूछ रहा है. तो अगले श्लोक में भी और थोड़ा चर्चा के बाद श्री कृष्ण भगवान इसका उत्तर देते हैं. The scientific research on this verse, the first verse, had shown that with the regular practice of transcendental meditation, there is a significant increase in intelligence test scores and increased ability to focus attention. And we have seen that this helps students a great deal. I will invite any questions. Any questions? What I said in the long commentary, everything is pretty clear, I think. I made a couple of main points, but still, if anybody has any questions, please go ahead. In Hindi or in English, you can ask. No questions? Okay. So let's move on to the second shloka.
Jai Gurudev. Ghanshyam ji, may I request you to recite verse 2 of chapter 3.
ॐ यामिश्रेणैव वाक्येन बुद्धिं मोहय शिव मे तदेकं वद निश्चित्य येन श्रेयोऽहमाप्नुयाम्.
Thank you. Pooja ji.
Pooja, are you there? Unmute, please.
Madhvi, is Sunita there?
No, she isn't there, Anita ji. Can I go ahead reading otherwise?
Yes, yes, Madhvi, please go ahead.
Yeah, Pooja signed in, but looks like she got busy with something else. Okay.
It's
She's
fine.
not there? Yeah. Go ahead.
Jai Gurudev.
Oh, she's driving. She said she's driving. Okay. Never
I will
mind.
go. Okay, I'll go ahead, Himanshi.
Let's continue. Yeah. Yes, please.
Jai Gurudev. With these apparently opposed statements, thou dost, as it were, bewilder my intelligence. So, having made thy decision, tell me the one by which I may reach the highest good. The tone of this verse brings to light Arjuna's intimacy with Bhagwan Sri Krishna and his good understanding of the teaching. It also further reveals the alertness of Arjuna's mind in evaluating different aspects of the discourse. Apparently opposed, in verse 38 of the preceding chapter, Bhagwan Sri Krishna enjoined Arjuna to come out to fight. But in verse 45, he said to him, be without the three gunas, which means come out of the field of activity. Again, in verse 47, he said, you have control over action alone. Do not attach yourselves to inaction. Then, in verse 48, he expressed the synthesis of action and the established intellect in the words, established in yoga, O winner of wealth, perform actions. In verse 49, however, he went on to destroy the very principle of this synthesis by declaring, far away indeed from the balanced intellect is the action devoid of greatness. Arjuna wants to verify whether these apparently opposed statements point to some hidden principle which has not yet been expressed, or whether there exists some hidden link joining them together. In the 7th verse of chapter 2, Arjuna had surrendered himself to Bhagwan Sri Krishna, saying, tell me decisively what is good for me. Now he finds that he is being provided with two boats, each apparently going in an opposite direction. He is asked simultaneously to come on to this and to get into that. So he stands bewildered and asks, tell me which boat to take, this or that, for if I start in two boats, I am sure to drown. His question is a pertinent one. The words apparently opposed indicate Arjuna's modesty. Wishing to draw attention to the fact that Bhagwan Sri Krishna is offering him statements that oppose each other, he softens the expression by adding apparently. And again, when he wants to convey what Bhagwan Sri Krishna is bewildering his intelligence, he shows his modesty by adding as it were. Arjuna needed some intellectual jolt some means of quickly shaking the intellect to bring him out of the state of suspension. To this end, Bhagwan Sri Krishna showered Arjuna with apparently opposed statements of truth. Thus, Bhagwan Sri Krishna succeeded in bringing Arjuna's mind to the level where he could think in a practical manner. He became so practical as to say, "Thou dost bewilder my intelligence." Now, Bhagwan Sri Krishna begins the second course of his teaching, the most glorious aspect of the wisdom of practical life. Jai Gurudev.
So, as we have noticed, Arjuna is alert and he grasped what Sri Krishna Bhagavan was trying to tell him in the previous chapter. And he's saying that in 3 to 4 instances, he was told apparently opposed statements. He said they seem to be opposed. Very humbly he's asking. He's not saying, Krishna, why did you say 2 opposing things? He says, they seem to be opposed. So that's very nice of him. And so he's asking for some explanation. Because first, Krishna Bhagavan said, come out and fight. Means action. Then he said, be without the 3 gunas, which means no action. When you go beyond the 3 gunas, there is silence, there is no action. And then again, Sri Krishna Bhagavan said, you have control only over action. And he says, do not attach yourself to inaction. So there seems to be some contradiction. And then Sri Krishna Bhagavan continues. He says, established in yoga, perform action. Yogastha kuru karmani. So how can that be? You want me to be silent and then do action again? So he is asking for clarification. And also after this statement, Yogastha kuru karmani, Sri Krishna Bhagavan says, action without balanced intellect is no good. So Arjuna is wondering if there is some hidden knowledge that had not been given, or if there is some link between these seemingly opposing statements. So when somebody like Sri Krishna Bhagavan is saying something, and if we don't understand or if we have a question, one should think, oh, there must be some reason why, somebody like Krishna Bhagavan is saying this. Instead of saying, you're saying opposite things, it doesn't make sense. Not like that. So this is a very important point for all of us to understand. And we are getting a message that when some great people, when they say something, and if we don't understand, we don't criticize them and saying that doesn't make sense. That only indicates our ignorance. So wise people, when they hear something they don't understand or they need clarification from enlightened people, they will only think that, oh, there must be some reason why Sri Krishna Bhagavan said that. So I think that's a very important point for all of us to pick up. And then in the following verses, so about the statements that seem to be opposing each other. And I gave a couple of examples for that. So as a result of Arjuna's questions, in the following verses, the most glorious aspect of wisdom of practical life unfolds. And by the end of the discourse on Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna becomes totally enlightened about this knowledge that being happy in spite of the experience of coexistence of opposite values of life, that is enlightenment. Because in enlightenment, you are living the absolute as well as the relative. You are living both at the same time. So because you are in the relative, there will always be a tendency for some conflict or there. But how do you reconcile? This is the knowledge that we are going to get as a result of Arjuna's intelligent questions at the beginning of this chapter, Karma Yoga. When everything is okay in life, one can be happy. That's no big deal. But when one is happy in spite of having problems, one is happy and balanced in spite of facing the conflict situation, that is greatness in life. And that is the kind of knowledge we are getting from Karma Yoga. How do they do it? How do enlightened people do it? By enduring, adjusting, and remembering shlokas that we read in previous chapter 14 and 15 of chapter 2. Chapter 4 is Matra Sparshastu Kaunteya, which means pleasure and pain come and go. Bear them patiently. Only then one becomes fit for Amritatva or immortality. So this requires patience on the part of sadhaka. On the path, when we are doing sadhana, we may be faced with some challenging situations, but we bear them patiently. We endure is the word. It's one of the requirements for sadhaka to move forward in sadhana and to progress in sadhana. Adi Shankaracharya said, if you have no patience, he said, you are no good. So it's very important for us to have patience. We can't start a TM and then in a year we are saying, oh, when am I going to practice? Patiently. And Swami Vivekananda said, if you don't have self-control, you are useless. Plain and simple words. They tell you are no good if you have no patience. If you don't have self-control, you are useless. So in this chapter 3, towards the end, we also learn what self-control is, how we get it, what is sense control. All these things are very clearly explained in later verses of chapter 3. And to these two things that Adi Shankaracharya and Swami Vivekananda said, they said, if you don't have patience, you are no good. If you don't have self-control, you are useless. I added one more thing to it. And I say that if you don't have a routine, which includes TM, AM, PM, you may be a loser, because only by doing our program regularly, we progress in life to higher states of consciousness. Otherwise, we are wasting our time. So that's not a good thing to waste time, because time is so precious. Maharishi said that we have two very beautiful gifts from God. One is love and the other one is time. Time is so precious. And Gurudev said, don't sell diamond for the price of spinach. Because only when you don't know the value of time, you do that. It's like diamond, and you cannot just give it away for the price of something like spinach, which is so inexpensive and cheap. So one should remember that one is very fortunate to get human birth. After so many, births in the lower species, one gets human birth. And then one should make good use of it. So I'll say a few words in Hindi. Arjun bole, आप मिले हुए वचनों से मेरी बुद्धि को मोहित कर रहे हैं, इसलिए उस एक बात को निश्चित करके कहिए जिससे मैं कल्याण को प्राप्त हो जाऊं। भगवान पहले बोले बुद्धि योग से कर्म अत्यंत निकृष्ट, मतलब नीचे हैं, तो बुद्धि का ही आश्रय ग्रहण कर। इस कथन से तो अर्जुन ने समझा कि भगवान ज्ञान की प्रशंसा कर रहे हैं और कर्मों की निंदा कर रहे हैं। फिर भगवान बोले, तेरा कर्म में अधिकार है और तू योग में स्थित होकर कर्म कर। तो अर्जुन ने यह बात समझी कि भगवान मुझे कर्म में नियुक्त कर रहे हैं। इस प्रकार हमें दिखाई दिया। तो अर्जुन पूछ रहे हैं, भगवान इस एक बात को निश्चित करके कहिए, कर्म करना है। He wants straight and simple answer. So that's what he's asking. So in the following verses, we get beautiful answers to Arjuna's questions. And I will cover scientific research very briefly. In this verse, the scientific research had shown that with regular practice of meditation, transcendental meditation, there is increased mental clarity, increased intellectual understanding, increased intellectual performance, and increased wakefulness. This increased wakefulness and mental clarity is very important, especially for students or even for working people. Because when you have mental clarity, you are able to accomplish any task quickly and more efficiently. And for that, wakefulness is also very important. Because if you are half sleepy and half drowsy, then you are not really performing at your best. So there is increased wakefulness with regular practice of TM in activity, that you see that you are more wakeful and alert with more mental clarity in activity. So that is the result. That is the scientific research on this shloka. So I'll stop here and invite any questions.
Hemaji,
Yeah.
not really a question, but a little addition to the statement of established in yoga, because just now, 2 days back, we have read Maharishi commentary on yoga on the International Yoga Day.
Yeah.
So when we read that, exactly what I would like to add is that the state of mind of Arjuna, the way Maharishi described in that commentary was that you need to have the mental yoga, the intellectual yoga, the physical yoga, because he explained it so beautifully how yoga does not mean only the physical aspect of life. So when you have your clarity of mind, you are saying in the scientific research, and wakefulness, awareness, clarity, this all gives right to mental yoga. And when Arjuna's this question come established in yoga, though do I consider that he understands all the 3-4 aspects of yoga and then performs action?
Yes. It's not made that clear in the commentary of this verse, but it is implied that when we are practicing transcendental meditation, we are improving in all levels. I don't remember where, but I remember Maharishi made this statement that we improve on all levels. That is mental, intellectual, and spiritual. So in all levels, it is holistic development, all-round development. It's not confined to just mental aspect. We get peace of mind, not like that. So that's why, the mental aspect, of course, we accomplish with the regular practice of transcendental meditation. But after TM, the next most important aspect is yogasanas. And these are very beautiful preparation for meditation. So that's why we do stretching yogasanas before meditation, and then follow up with the meditation. So you're preparing the ground, for a good meditation. Good point that you brought out. Okay. So shall we move on? Any questions? Any other comments or questions?
So this, we can also understand that just external renunciation is just not enough if one would like to enlighten themselves. They, like as it has been said in chapter 2, Yogastha Kur Karmani, we have to establish ourselves in that state of consciousness and only perform our actions from that state so that they are all fulfilled and accomplished.
Yes. That is the key point. Yogastha Kuru Karmani is the seed point in second chapter on which the entire knowledge of third chapter Karma Yoga is based. And so, like Arjuna asked, how can you be silent and then, act? How can you do both things? So that's what is explained here very beautifully in 43 verses in Karma Yoga. And so we will learn more about that as we move on. Okay.
So going ahead, Ghanshyamji, may we request you to recite verse 3 of chapter 3?
Om Sri Bhagavan Lokesmin Dvidhanishta Purapokta Mayanagha Jnana Yogena Chanam Karma Yogena Yoginam.
Jai Gurudev. The blessed Sri Krishna Bhagavan said, as expounded by me of old, O blameless one, there are in this world two paths, the yoga of knowledge for men of contemplation and the yoga of action for men of action. In this verse, the word yoga is common to both Jnana Yoga and Yoga of knowledge and Karma Yoga, the yoga of action. The state of transcendental consciousness is the state of yoga or union where the mind remains so completely united with the divine nature that it becomes it. When this union is naturally maintained, irrespective of the modes of the mind in the waking, dreaming, and sleeping states, then that state of consciousness is said to be cosmic consciousness. When the state of transcendental consciousness or yoga is supplemented by the process of thinking and discrimination in order to develop it into cosmic consciousness, the way is called the yoga of knowledge, Jnana Yoga. Whereas, when the state of transcendental consciousness is supplemented by action on the sensory level in order to develop it into cosmic consciousness, the way is called Karma Yoga, the yoga of action. These two types of yoga fulfill the needs of all men, whether contemplative or active. The experience of the transcendent during meditation is realization of only one aspect of reality, the unmanifested absolute aspect. For realization of the complete truth, this experience has to go hand in hand with the experience of the manifested aspect, which is the relative phase of existence. In order that transcendental bliss consciousness may be lived at all times, it is necessary that it should not be lost when the mind comes out of meditation and engages in activity. For this to be possible, the mind has to become so intimately familiar with the state of being that it remains grounded in the mind at all times through all the mental activity of thinking, discriminating, and deciding, and through all phases of action on the sensory level. For this, in turn, it is necessary that the process of gaining transcendental consciousness through meditation and that of engaging in activity should be alternated so that transcendental consciousness and the waking state of consciousness may come close together and finally merge into one another to give rise to the state of cosmic consciousness, the state in which one lives bliss consciousness, the inner awareness of being through all the activity of the waking and dreaming states and through the silence of the deep sleep state. As there are two types of people, men of thought and men of action, so there are two ways of life. The way of the recluse for the man of thought and the way of householder for the man of action. The man of thought after meditation engages in the mental activity of contemplation and thereby achieves the integration of the transcendental and waking states of consciousness, whereas a man of action after meditation engages in the field of action and thereby accomplishes the same goal. Thus, the Jnana Yoga of the recluse and the Karma Yoga of the householder differ from one another only in the phase of activity. One type of man devotes himself to the mental activity of thinking, discriminating, and deciding about the nature of world and the divine. The other devotes himself to action without making the process of thinking a means of fulfillment. In this way, both engage in activity after gaining transcendental consciousness. Sri Krishna Bhagavan says to Arjuna that these two ways of realization have been handed on from generation to generation from time immemorial. They are two distinct paths for the two distinct types of people who lead two distinct ways of life. Unfortunately, a muddle has been created in the understanding of this principle of realization, the high way of evolution. If the householder adopts the outlook of yoga of knowledge, then he falls into the world of thought and becomes less practical. Similarly, if a recluse embraces the outlook of the yoga of action, he loses the opportunity of impartial discrimination and the constant flow of contemplation. He falls into the field of action, into the marketplace of life. Both paths are equally valid for developing cosmic consciousness. Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga each presents a direct way to fulfillment, but the path chosen should suit the way of life and the natural tendencies of the aspirant. A householder should not try to realize through Sankhya or Jnana Yoga. Let him adopt the path of Karma Yoga and fulfilling the aspirations of life in the world, he will gain cosmic consciousness in a natural and harmonious manner. Similarly, a recluse or sannyasi should not aspire to adopt the path of Karma Yoga. He should follow the Sankhya teaching or Jnana Yoga. And fulfilling the aspirations of a reckless way of life, he also will attain cosmic consciousness in the natural and harmonious manner. Those interested in spiritual progress have for centuries adopted an outlook suited only to the reckless way of life. While perfectly valid for the few who retire from the world, such an outlook has no place in the lives of the vast majority of mankind who led the householder's way of life. The path of Karma Yoga does not, like the path of knowledge, proceed by way of thinking or intellect understanding. It is the innocent path of action supplemented by transcendental meditation. Thinking of the divine self or of God has no place on the path of Karma Yoga. Those who try to keep their mind on God while they are engaged in action neither succeed in taking the mind to God consciousness at the level of transcendental divinity, nor do they properly succeed in the field of action. Because action becomes weak when the mind is divided and not fully given to it. This amounts to a loss in both directions. They neither fully become men of God nor succeed as men of the world. For those who want to be successful both in the field of the divine and in the world, the path is that of Karma Yoga, a few minutes of meditation in the morning and in the evening, and normal activity during the rest of the day. The meditation, however, should be a kind that takes the mind directly to transcendental consciousness, and the activity during the day should be undertaken with ease and without strain. It must be borne in the mind that the practice of meditation is essential for both the recluse and the householder. At the same time, it is essential for enlightenment that after the practice, both should engage in activity, whether the activity is of the intellect, as in the case of recluse, or of the senses, as in the case of the householder, is immaterial. A recluse is provided with a particular code of thinking which serves to keep him fixed to his path of renunciation. The householder likewise is provided with a code of action to keep him fixed to his path of action. This activity after meditation is important for the integration of the waking and transcendental states of consciousness, but the actual content of thinking of the recluse and the action of householder does not in any way help to bring about the integration of the two states of consciousness. It is the activity as such, physical or mental, which is of value in bringing about integration. The content of thought and action certainly has its value in the two ways of life, but it does not touch the field of being. The purpose of both paths is to establish a man on a level of consciousness where he will enjoy a meaningful life established in the eternal freedom of bliss consciousness. Such a man becomes more powerful and successful in his own way of life. The activity of the householder and the seclusion of the recluse are fully protected and brought to fulfillment.
So, yeah. So, in this verse, one point is made very clear, and that is the experience of transcending is the basis of life for anybody and everybody. Doesn't matter if one is a recluse or a householder. So both have to have the experience of yoga. What is yoga? It is that state of perfect silence of transcendental consciousness. Yoga means union, where the mind remains so completely united with the divine nature of Atma, that the mind becomes Atma. So in that state, there is no mind. Mind had merged in the silence of Atma. So that is the most basic fundamental fact, that for anybody to be successful in life, one has to have that experience of yoga. Once you have that experience, you transcend. Then what you do after meditation, between your morning and evening meditation, what you do is up to yourself. It doesn't matter what you do. Maharishi mentioned that activity is important. And this activity brings the divinity of Atma into practical life, into the relative. That is the best blessing of Karma Yoga. And what is that? It is to bring divine of the transcendent into the practical life, into the relative. That's when life really becomes very beautiful, that everything you are doing, everything in your relative life is colored with divine. It's a beautiful experience. So that is the point. So for this, Maharishi said, there are two types of people. One, they want to be recluse. They want to go away to Himalayas and do their long meditation. And then in between, they read scriptures, Vedic literature, like that. Their intellect is active. So they perform that kind of intellectual activity. But for vast majority of people like us, we are householders. We have responsibilities and duties in the relative. So they do meditation morning and evening, and in between, they do whatever they are supposed to do. Like if you are a student, you go to school. If you are father, you go to work. Women also work. If you have a job, you go to work. Or if a woman doesn't work, she takes care of the household duties. So this is the life of householder. But in both situations, what is essential is to do your transcendental meditation morning and evening. So that is the difference in the activity only. Householder performs activity engaged in the senses, body, actions, whereas the recluse is engaged in intellectual activity of reading Vedic literature or reading whatever. So if we remember that, then you got the point what this shloka is saying. The experience of transcendent means Atma during meditation is realization of only unmanifested absolute aspect of life. So you transcend and you experience the absolute aspect of life, that's silence. But for realization of complete truth, experience of the manifest relative life is also very necessary. That's the point Maharishi was trying to bring out, where he said, he used the word integration. Integration of the absolute value of life into the relative value of life. You are integrating both. Only then we have the experience of complete truth. Fullness is there only when you are familiar with both. So in order to do that, what we do meditation repeatedly. When you transcend, you are getting intimate. He used the word intimate. Means you transcend, you experience that absolute, that silence. You come out and then you go back again. It's like you have a new friend, and then when you visit the friend daily, once or twice, you are getting intimate with that friend. It's like that. Atma is you have a good friend over there. So when you go visit Atma in your meditation repeatedly, then you're getting intimate with that experience. And that's what is very important in bringing out the value of divine into the practical life. So that is the comments on verse 3. And the scientific research had shown improved academic performance. It is somewhat similar to the previous shloka's scientific research. So that is very brief. It is a short comment on scientific research. So I'll stop here and invite any questions. Any questions, please? Bhuvnesh Sharma ji was supposed to comment on the shloka, but in the last minute he told me he's not able to come. So I did not prepare anything in Hindi. And without preparing, I cannot say anything in Hindi. In English, I can say whatever I want, but Hindi, I have to prepare so that I can speak good Hindi. So, but I will just say, read the Hindi translation from my Hindi book. For this is the third verse we are doing. Okay. So, श्री भगवान बोले, हे निष्पाप, इस लोक में 2 प्रकार की निष्ठा मेरे द्वारा पहले कही गई हैं। उनमें से सांख्य योगियों की निष्ठा तो ज्ञान योग से और योगियों की निष्ठा कर्म योग से होती है। So that is the, Hindi translation of the third verse. So I'll stop here. Any questions? So now I'm wondering if we have time for the next shloka, or we should stop and do recitation.
We will do the recitation. It's already 8:41, Hemaji. So
yeah, not enough time. And the fourth verse is very important,
yes.
About Naishkarmya and all that. So we'll stop here. And then, Madhavi, let's do a few minutes meditation and then recitation.
Yes. May I request everybody to be seated comfortably? We will do a short meditation for 5 minutes before we proceed with reciting the chapter 3. Jai Gurudev. Jai Gurudev. Jai Gurudev. Jai Gurudev. Ghanshyamji, can we have the recitation of chapter 3?
जी दीदी जय गुरुदेव। ओम श्री परमात्मने नमः। ओम पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन गृहीतां मध्ये महाभक्तम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनी अम्बा त्वां शन्तताम् गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्रमरुतः स्तुवन्ति देव्यैस्तवै वेदैः शान्तपदक्रमो गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तं न विदुः सुरासुरगणा देवाय तस्मै नमः। ओम श्री परमात्मने नमः। अथ तृतीयोऽध्यायः। अर्जुन उवाच ध्यायसि चेत् कर्मणस्ते मतः बुद्धिर्जनार्दन तत्किं कर्मणि घोरे मां योजयसि केशव यामिश्रेणैव वाक्येन बुद्धिं मोहयसीव मे तदेकं वद निश्चित्य येन श्रेयोऽहमाप्नुयाम्। श्रीभगवानुवाच लोकेऽस्मिन् द्विविधा निष्ठा पुरा प्रोक्ता मया नघ ज्ञानयोगेन साङ्ख्यानां कर्मयोगेन योगिनाम् न कर्मणामनः ब्रह्मान् नैष्कर्म्यं पुरुषोऽश्नुते न च सन्न्यसनं देवा सिद्धिं समधिगच्छति न हि कश्चित् क्षणमपि जातु तिष्ठन्त्यकर्मकृत् पार्थ्यते ह्यवशः कर्म सर्वः प्रकृतिजैर्गुणैः कर्मेन्द्रियाणि संयम्य ययास्ते मनसा स्मरन् इन्द्रियार्थान् प्रमुखात्मा मिथ्याचारः स उच्यते यस्त्विन्द्रियाणि मनसा नियम्यरभतेऽर्जुन कर्मेन्द्रियैः कर्मयोगम् असक्तः स विशिष्यते नियतं कुरु कर्म त्वं कर्म ज्यायो ह्यकर्मणः शरीरयात्रापि च ते न प्रसिद्ध्येद कर्मणः यज्ञार्थात् कर्मणो यत्र लोकोऽयं कर्मबन्धनः तदर्थं कर्म कौन्तेय मुक्तसङ्गः समाचर स हि यज्ञः प्रजा सृष्ट्वा पुरोवाच प्रजापतिः अनेन प्रसवस्यत्वा एष वोत्कृष्टकामधुक् देवान् भावयतानेन ते देवा भावयन्तु वः परस्परं भावयन्तः श्रेयः परमवाप्स्यथ इष्टान् भोगान् वो देवा दास्यन्ते यज्ञभाविताः तैर्दत्तान् प्रदायेभ्यो यो भुङ्क्तेस्तेन एव शः यज्ञशिष्टासिनः सन्तो मुच्यन्ते शर्वकिल्बिषये भुञ्जते त्यक्त्वघं पापा ये पचन्त्यात्मकारणा भवति भूतानि पर्जन्यादशम्भवः यज्ञात् भवति पर्जन्यो यज्ञः कर्मसमुद्भवः कर्म ब्राह्मोद्भवं विद्धि ब्रह्माक्षरसमुद्भवम् तस्मात् सर्वगतं ब्रह्म नित्यं यज्ञे प्रतिष्ठितम् एवं प्रवर्तितं चक्रं नानुवर्त्यति यया अघायुरिन्द्रियाणां मोघं पार्थ स जीवति यत्स्वात्मरतिरेव स्यात् आत्मतृप्तश्च मानवः आत्मन्येव च सन्तुष्टस्तस्य कार्यं न विद्यते नैव तस्य गतेनार्थो न कृते नेह कश्चन न चास्य सर्वभूतेषु कश्चिदध्यव्यपाश्रयः तस्मात् सक्तः सततं कार्यं कर्म समाचर असक्तो ह्यचरन् कर्म परमाप्नोति पुरुषः कर्मणैव हि संसिद्धिम् आस्थितः जनकादय लोकसङ्ग्रहमेवापि सम्पश्यन् कर्तुमर्हसि यद्यदाचरति श्रेष्ठस्तद्देवेतरो जनः स यत्प्रमाणं कुरुते लोकस्तदनुवर्तते न मे पार्थास्ति कर्तव्यं त्रिषु लोकेषु किश्चन नानवाप्यमवाप्तव्यं वर्त एव हि कर्मणि यदि ह्ययं न वर्तेयं चातु कर्मण्यतद्रितः मम वर्तमानुवर्तन्ते मनुष्यः पार्थ सर्वशः उत्सीदेयुरिमे लोका न कुर्यां कर्म चेदहम् शङ्करस्य च कर्तास्य उपहन्यामिमः प्रजाः सक्तः कर्मण्य विद्वांसो यथा कुर्वन्ति भारत कुर्यात् विद्वांस्तथा सक्तश्चिकीर्षुर्लोकसङ्ग्रहं न बुद्धिभेदं जनयेत् ज्ञानां कर्मसङ्गिनां जोषयेत् सर्वकर्माणि विद्वान् युक्तः समाचरन् प्रकृतिः क्रियमाणानि गुणैः कर्माणि सर्वशः अहङ्कार विमूढात्मा कर्ताहमिति मन्यते तत्त्ववित्तु महाबाहो कर्म विभागयोः गुणागुणेषु वर्तन्त इति मत्वा ससज्जते प्रकृतेर्गुणसम्मूढा सज्जन्ते गुणकर्मसु तान् कृष्णविदो मन्दा कृष्णभिन्नविचालयेत् मयि सर्वाणि कर्माणि सन्न्यस्याध्यात्मचेतसा निराशीर्निर्ममो भूत्वा युध्यस्व विगतज्वरः ये मे मतमिदं नित्यम् अनुतिष्ठन्ति मानवाः श्रद्धावन्तो न सूयन्तो मुच्यन्ते तेऽपि कर्मभिः ये त्वेतदम्भ्यसूयन्तो नानुतिष्ठन्ति ते मतम् सर्वज्ञानविमूढास्तान् विद्धि नष्टान चेतसा सदसंचेष्टते स्वास्याः प्रकृतिर्ज्ञानवानपि प्रकृतिं यान्ति भूतानि विग्रहा किं करिष्यति इन्द्रियस्येन्द्रियास्यार्थे रागद्वेषो व्यवस्थितौ तयोर्नवशमागच्छेत् तौ हस्य परिपन्थिनौ श्रेयान् स्वधर्मो विगुणः परधर्मास्त्वनुष्ठितात् स्वधर्मे निधनं श्रेया परधर्मो भयावहः अर्जुनुवाच अथ केन प्रयुक्तोऽयं पापं चरति पूरुषः अच्छिन्नपि वार्ष्णेया बलाद्विनियोजितः श्रीभगवानुवाच काम एषा क्रोध एषा रजोगुणसमुद्भवः महासनो महापाप्मा विद्येन मिहवेरिडम् धूमेन प्रियते वह्निर्यथा दर्शो मलेन च यतुल्बेनाव्रतो गर्भस्तदा तेन तमाव्रतम् आवृतं ज्ञानमेतेन ज्ञानिनो नित्यवैरिणा कामरूपेण कौन्तेय दुष्पूरेणानलेन च इन्द्रियाणि मनोबुद्धिर् अस्याधिष्ठानमुच्यते एतैर्विमुह्य यत्केश ज्ञानमावृत्य देहिनम् तस्मात् त्वमिन्द्रियाण्यादौ यम्य भरतर्षभ आत्मानं प्रजह्येनं ज्ञानविज्ञाननाशनम् इन्द्रियाणि परण्याहु इन्द्रियेभ्यः परं मनः मनसस्तु परा बुद्धिर्यो बुद्धे परतस्तु सः एवं बुद्धे परं बुद्ध्वा संस्थाप्यात्मानमात्मना च हि शत्रुं महाबाहो कामरूपं पुराशदम् ॐ तत्सदिति श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासु उपनिषत्सु ब्रह्मविद्यायां योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्णार्जुनसंवादे कर्मयोगो नाम तृतीयोऽध्यायः। ॐ श्री परमात्मने नमः। श्रीकृष्णार्पणमस्तु।
Jai Gurudev. Can we go ahead with the Shanti part?
हरि ओम शांतिरंतरिक्षगुं शांतिः पृथिवी शांतिरापः शांतिरुपदयः शांतिः पदयः शांतिर्भुवे देवाः शांतिर्ब्रह्म शांतिः सर्वगुं शांति शांतिरेव शांतिः शाम शांतिरेधि जतो यतः समीहसे ततो नु अभयं कुरु षण्णः कुरु प्रजाभ्यो भयं नः पशुभ्यः। ओम शांति शांति शांति। जय गुरुदेव।
Jai Gurudev.
Thank you very much, Ghanshyamji. May I request all the other participants also to come on to their videos and unmute themselves so that we can wish each other Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev, Bani.
Jai Gurudev, Hema ji.
Jai Gurudev, Anita ji. Jai
Jai
Gurudev.
Gurudev, Hema ji.
Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev, Bindu. Jai Gurudev, Bela. Jai Gurudev to Happy Girl. Jai Gurudev to Anne. She just left. Okay. Nice seeing you all. We'll meet again next Friday, same time. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev.
So I'll end the meeting now.